Taking up positions down by the river itself means that there's a nice chunky obstacle that the Russians are going to have to cross while we get to shoot at them. Most of the sight lines here are pretty short, but the enemy are going to be coming into sight in such a way that we should always get the drop on them. Unfortunately, the first thing the Russians do is fire a preparatory bombardment to the objective area on our side of the bridge. This is one of the downsides to choosing an obvious position. We're getting suppressed, we're taking casualties, we've got smoke and dust that's blinding the infantry. And it's obviously the Russians' plan to make the most of their artillery. They're suddenly rushing forward, coming out of the woodwork. Up front, our little tripwire squad that's there to give us some early warning almost gets run over before they immobilise a BMP with a rifle grenade. On the far right, the Russians are bum rushing more BMPs straight across the river. They should be being shot up right now, but our guys are thinly stretched along the riverbank and the artillery is keeping their heads down. The tripwire squad has decided it needs to get the hell out of there. Russian infantry is pouring out of the BMPs and threatening to overrun them, but as they try and fall back across the river, the BMPs on the right start opening up on them. All the while, the strikers are hammering the BMPs with their 50 cals, but the rounds are just bouncing off. They do better against the Russian infantry though. They can see through all the smoke and dust thanks to their thermal sights, and they hammer any Russians they see. Regardless, the Russians are firmly across the river on the right hand side, and the American fire teams on that side are falling back under artillery and cannon fire. It's time to reorganise. So these survivors and the troops from the left are setting up a second defensive line to try and stop the Russians from rolling us up from the right flank, which, after pushing another platoon across the river, they try. There's plenty of dust and smoke about here, allowing the Russians to get right on top of the second line and dump out their troops, but in the nasty short-range fight that erupts, the GIs get the better of the enemy and force them to fall back. By now, both sides have taken heavy casualties. At least the artillery have slackened off, but it doesn't take long for it to come back and start falling on the second line. This area is fairly difficult to get a spot on, so there's probably some Russians directing the artillery from the hill on our own side of the river. Casualties continue to mount as the bombardment continues until our striker platoon has been driven from the objective area and is no longer capable of putting up a decent fight. We've lost 19 dead, 11 wounded and one of the strikers, but the Russians have suffered too. They've got 43 dead, 22 wounded, 1 missing, and we've managed to knock out 6 BMPs. But they're in control of the bridge, and that's what matters. That could have gone better, so if you want to try another option, then pick one. When you're ready to move on, just click the link on the left and we'll have a look at what happened.